Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Let's Focus on the MENA Region. During our last episodes we have been discussing the issues regarding Lebanon. Today we will be focusing on another country from the region, namely Tunisia. Today we have a special guest with us. It's Mr. Michael Gahler. Mr. Gahler is member of the European Parliament from Germany. He has been serving as member of the European Parliament since 1999. Today he is a coordinator of EPP Group in the Committee of Foreign Affairs, where he is also serving as standing rapporteur on Tunisia. Mr. Gahler, thank you for your time and for being with us today, and especially for joining this important discussion on Tunisia. On the 25th July of last year, especially on Tunisia's Republic Day, the president has announced a state of emergency. He justified it on the basis of ongoing political crisis, the inability of the state to manage the COVID situation, economic difficulties. He announced on that day the state of emergency. He dismissed the prime minister, the government, and the list goes on. The situation on the ground remains very fragile and tense. My first question would be, how do you assess these developments?
Well, first of all, in normal circumstances, when a government is not able to deliver or doesn't have a majority in the parliament, any president could dissolve the parliament, call fresh elections, and then there would be a new start. Now, what we have seen in Tunisia is that the president has referred to Article 80 of the Constitution, but from the very moment invoking it, he left already the constitutional framework, because prior to calling on that, he would have had to consult with the prime minister, with the government, and he would have to inform the constitutional court, which is not yet existing, okay? And one consequence of this is also, according to the constitution, that the parliament is considered of being in permanent session. Now, what we have seen is that the president has suspended the parliament, so he has just done the opposite, and has ever since ruled by his own decrees, declaring those decrees being superior to the existing constitution. So what we are faced with is a de facto coup d'etat from above, and that is where we are, and that is a very problematic situation.
What do you think are the president's intentions by doing something like this?
Well, I think his intentions are, of course, to overcome a political stalemate, but by means that are according to his motivations. And I think what he would like to install is a presidential system, and to do away with the role of the political parties. And I think this approach is one that is clearly against the first two articles of the Constitution that have eternal character, as it is said in the Constitution itself. And that is why I'm highly concerned about his action. I've been in contact with people who knew him when he was a professor, and those students of the time said, well, he is doing exactly what he told us as students 10 years ago. So that is his way of looking at a state which is, well, I have to say, closer to Ben Ali than to the current system.
I wanted to ask you a question, given the current situation in the country, which is absolutely not an easy one. How do you assess the cooperation between the EU and Tunisia? Because Tunisia has always been a very important partner to the EU. How do you see it?
Well, I have to say, after the revolution in 2011, we engaged enormously and with a lot of enthusiasm. The EU as a whole, in particular also our parliament, that had earlier relations with the Ligue Tunisienne des Droits de l'Homme, with the Human Rights League before the revolution, and so to say now after the revolution, when the wishes of the people had been fulfilled and when we had seen a democratization and a new constitution after a while. I think that has been our motivation to support the country in multifold ways, with support for reforms, with macro-financial assistance. And this has unfortunately not led to especially economic and social stabilization of the country. I mean, they were faced with 1 million of refugees from Libya. They also, like the rest of the world, they had COVID. And the modernization of the administration and the creating more efficiency and effectivity in the institutions, that has not delivered, unfortunately, to the extent necessary. And still, for me, that cannot be an argument to do away with the constitution and simply rule by decrees by a single person.
I would like to take us back to December 2021, when the president announced a process that will start with an online consultation on constitutional and political reforms, which would go from the 1st of January until 20th of March. And 20th March is a good date because it's Independence Day. And it seems, by the way, that the participation rate was only between 4 and 7% in this online consultation. Then we should have, by July, a referendum on the constitutional reforms, which should lead then at the end of the year to legislative elections on the 17th of December. First, I would like to ask you, how do you think it is possible to organize all this process without consulting political parties, civil society, but just by deciding himself to go into such an important process? And the second question is, how does EPP Group and see it, and what is the mood in the parliament?
Well, first of all, I think such a process in a country like Tunisia, an online process, is by no means transparent, nor is it representative. And as always in such processes, you can read out of this process what you want to read. So I think it's a pseudo process without involving civil society and the political parties. They have the same right. The members of parliament have the same legitimacy from the voters like the president has, and you simply cannot ignore them in such a process. And I think whatever the outcome of this online referendum and now the subsequent setting up of whatever constitution, I'm pretty sure it will be one that disregards the role of the parties, that gives a strong man a strong lead, and thereby it is a tailor-made thing for him. The problem is that I see he was elected indeed out of frustration, because the parties had not delivered, neither Ennahda, nor neither Tunis, which is now virtually non-existent anymore, nor other parties. And out of this frustration, he was elected. But that doesn't mean that he could simply do away with the given framework. He had rather found a party for himself in the meanwhile, and then see to it that he has a possibility to get his views legitimately underpinned through an election. But he didn't, as I said, he didn't call for fresh elections with perhaps a party that he would have founded around him, but has done it in this way. So now the situation, whatever the outcome or whatever he writes in this, I'm pretty sure there will be a low turnout, and there will be a yes for that. That is, in all these autocratic and non-transparent circumstances, the one who has a will to do something, he gets his will, but it doesn't increase his legitimacy.
But do you still think that we can then have fair and free elections? And especially, would it be possible by any chance to have an EU observation mission for the elections in Tunisia?
Well, we still have EZ, that is the election body that is independent by its statutes and should be independent and remain. And then it depends very much who is allowed to stand. If everybody is allowed to stand, as it was in the first democratic elections in 2011, if the media are free, then that could be remedied. But if the parties continue to be under pressure, if civil society or the famous quartet that had played a role in earlier crises, if that is silenced or disregarded, so if the overall framework conditions do not allow that, then we will not send a mission. Unless, as I said, everybody is allowed to stand and the media are free.
Last but not least, I would like to ask you a final question and link it to the current situation in Europe, namely the Russian aggression against Ukraine and the impact it's having already on Europe. And I would like to bring another topic into the discussion. It's the food security. We have been hearing a lot that we have been facing now more than ever food insecurity around the world, and we know that the whole MENA region will be impacted, and most probably Tunisia also. How do you see it, and what could the EU do in case the situation gets really aggravated?
Well, we have already seen in recent years that Russia has been involved in the neighboring country, in Libya, with the Wagner Group. That has added to instability, and certainly, as they were on one or the other side in Libya, has also contributed to the flow of refugees to Tunisia in earlier years already, which the country had to cope with. Now, the current situation indeed has its imminent effect on North Africa as a whole, who are importers of crops from Russia and Ukraine being the biggest exporter in this field. Well, it's still possible that the worst case will not materialize. They have started bringing out the seeds in Ukraine, at least to an extent, so that hopefully we will not see 100% fallout of the harvest from Ukraine, but still the prices have already more than doubled for wheat, for instance. And for countries like Tunisia, it's a really catastrophe to have to pay so much more. So it will definitely impact unless the war is over in a foreseeable time, ceasefire, Russian withdrawal, so that Ukrainians can return to doing their normal work according to the season in the agricultural sector.
Thank you, Mr. Gahler, for your time. Thank you very much for watching this new episode of Let's Focus on the MENA region.